Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Elevenses. It's Wednesday, 10th of June. Bit of a dull and miserable day here in London since the spring broke. The weather's not been too fantastic, but we make the best of what we've got. At least it's not been too wet, so good riding weather for motorcycles, even if it has been a little bit chilly. Right, what have I got for you today? Quite a full house. There's not a lot of news around at the moment, as you might have guessed, because we're a little bit short of activities. Even so, as things are starting to unlock, there is more information about what's going on in the world, so I'll do my best to bring you what's happening. We got some news in the moment, including cancellation of Motorcycle Live this year. I've got a couple of interesting motorcycles, and a fully enclosed electric motorcycle, and another one which allows you to tune the power delivery and the power output of the bike to replicate historic motorcycles. We'll talk about noise issues in North Yorks and what's going on up there. Germany's putting electric charging points in, so is France. There's an interesting video there for you to watch of a track day rider with a tornado developing in front of him. And we'll finish off with a talk about how we use our brain as we're riding. Something I'm very interested in, always have been interested in the mental side of riding. So that's what's on the show today. Let's start with the motorcycle news item. First of all, as I said, the bad news is that if you were looking forward to the Motorcycle Live show in November this year, it's already a victim of the coronavirus crisis. Motorcycle Live at the NEC is by far and away the biggest show that we hold in the UK, and it attracts thousands of visitors every year. I make a pilgrimage up there myself from time to time. And although it's not on the scale of the really big European shows, it is a chance for UK riders to see new models for the first time in the flesh. However, it's gone the way of a lot of other events this year, and even though it's months away, the organisers say that the cancellation follows an extensive consultation period, and basically what they're worried about is the well-being both of visitors and of the people in the industry who will be there working. Managing Director of Motorcycle Live is Finlay McCallan, and he said, "Motorcycle Live is all about audience interaction, meeting with friends, climbing onto the latest machines and trying on all the latest gear. Many of us use it as an annual pilgrimage to meet with friends and family and enjoy a great day out. It's not just the public who join us, it's industry colleagues look forward to the event too. Therefore, as you can imagine," he says, "the event postponement has not been taken lightly." But again, he says that the safety is at the heart of this decision. As with any hard decision, we looked at it with a number of different perspectives and factored in various scenarios and restrictions that could be imposed. Running an event like Motorcycle Live under COVID-19 related restrictions, such as adhering to social distancing requirements, restricting attendance numbers and dictating the direction of people around the hall, all ultimately would have impacted negatively on the experience of those attending and therefore the very essence of the show. He goes on to say everybody involved is obviously disappointed, but they'll be working behind the scenes to deliver you a show in 2021. So the dates for that have already been decided, the 20th to the 28th of November 2021. That's when the next Motorcycle Live will be held. There is rather more hope for live motorcycle racing. I've talked in previous shows about plans that are going ahead to try to get MotoGP and World Superbikes and even domestic racing back underway. But over in the USA, the premier series over there, which is called Moto America, that got under the way last weekend, minus spectators, and with a seriously thinned out paddock as well. Once again, the way forward here is to minimize the number of people attending and maximize space available to keep people apart. So once racing is on, they can cover it on TV. So hopefully, when we get the dates for the other series to get back underway, I'll let you know what they are. Okay, now don't forget you're watching Survival Skills here. Kevin Williams with Elevenses. We're here bringing you topical news, controversial views, and biking tips. So what else have I got for you? Well, I got a motorcycle electric bike, which they try to they argue will put some excitement back into it by making it feel like bikes of old. I've got stories about noise in North Yorkshire and electric motorcycles charging points in Germany and France. And I'm going to finish off with a talk about how we use our brain to recognize what's going on in the world. Okay, almost as long as I've been riding motorcycles, there've been bike design exercises, and something that reappears over and over, not very often, but with fairly, I won't say monotonous regularity, but frequently enough, is something called a cabin motorcycle. Now, the cabin motorcycles, they're enclosed in some way. You probably will be aware of something called the Quasar, designed by a chap called Malcolm Newell. Now, that was originally designed, back in the late 1970s, if I remember correctly. And although it wasn't fully enclosed, it had open sides. It did have a windscreen and an integrated roof and a sort of a rear end. So the rider was basically tucked away from most of the weather, behind the windscreen with a windscreen wiper as well. And the sheer sort of bravado of the design really separated it out from anything else on the road at the time. It did look like, a sort of something out of Thunderbirds compared with the average motorcycle. But the big feature of the windscreen roof, apart from keeping the weather off, is the massively improved aerodynamics. Now, compared with a car, and this is one of the reasons that motorcycles struggle to get to car MPG, is the aerodynamics are improved by having a sort of an overall body like that. The Eco-Mobile, which you may have heard of, took it to the next level, and that was completely enclosed. But there's one difficulty with those fully enclosed motorcycles, and that's always what happens when you stop. Now, obviously, with a conventional motorcycle, you just pop a foot down. But if there's a bit of bodywork in the way, that's not actually possible. So there's usually some kind of outrigger wheel which fold down to hold the bike up at low speed, and then they'll either pop up again as soon as the bike's moving. The motive power of choice has, of course, always been petrol engines. But the video that I've linked to shows Lightning, the electric motorcycle manufacturer, are developing a fully enclosed electric motorcycle. Now, there's a very good reason for that, which I've just mentioned, is aerodynamics. Richard Hatfield is the CEO, and he was talking about the project to a magazine online. And he said that what we're really excited about is a very aerodynamic and efficient project, something that nobody else is really producing at this point. Now, that's something actually I've mentioned when I've looked at some of the electric motorcycles. I tested the Zeros last year, and they're both nakeds. And if there, as I said earlier, if there is a designer motorcycle which is guaranteed to be unaerodynamic, it's a naked motorcycle. It's effectively pushing, something with less aerodynamic ability than a brick through the air. So putting a fairing on a motorcycle is an obvious starting point, but going to a fully enclosed design is actually even more important because it does give you a huge efficiency improvement. And given that battery range is the big concern for electric motorcycles, then if you can improve the aerodynamics, you can certainly improve range, because quite simply you need less energy to push the bike through the air. What Lightning have been doing is working with wind tunnel testing. They've been using 3D printed models to prototype the bike. And then when they've got something that's workable, that's when they go to full-size testing. And apparently they have access to a large wind tunnel where they can fit the life-size bike in. Their histories of record-breaking electric motorcycles, their LS218, apparently hit 218 miles per hour, or 350 kph if you prefer, at Bonneville Salt Flats, and is currently the world's fastest motorcycle, I believe. So will this enclosed design get anywhere? Hard to say, really. Probably not. My guess is that the target market for a fully enclosed electric motorcycle is likely to be very, very small indeed. But the payoff could be that we start to see more aerodynamic electric motorcycles. Having a sort of non-aerodynamic design is fine for commuting, low speed use, but as soon as people want to actually start to travel distances, then the aerodynamics will become important. Okay, so don't forget, if you cannot ride at the moment, although most of us will probably be back out on the bikes by now, you can still read. You can head over to my Lulu page there, and you can pick up some of the books that I have written over the years. Watch out for special offers as well, which they do come along at regular intervals and will knock a bit off the price for you. Okay. What else have we got for you? Well, I'll come on to another electric motorcycle in a moment that mimics the design, the revs and the torque of an older petrol engine motorcycle. And I've got an item on Harley, who are building a self-balancing bike. And I'll finish off with how our brain helps us ride. Okay, but first of all, what's going on over in Germany? Well, the move in Germany is to require every filling station to provide an electric car charging port. And that'll be part of a 130 billion euro economic recovery plan that the German government is putting in place. They're aiming to get a significant shift onto electric vehicles in the country. So one of the things that they're doing is they're doubling their what they call the stimulus payment to people buying electric vehicles. It's upwards of €10,000 apparently. The government is also earmarking around €3 billion, something in that order, for battery cell production and charging infrastructure. So there's a very clear commitment in Germany to battery powered vehicles, and that will really put Germany in a leading position in terms of battery electric vehicle support. Although at the moment the demand for EVs is actually quite low, only 1.8% of registrations for new cars last year were electric vehicles. It is on the rise, and as soon as people are less concerned about so-called range anxiety as these charging stations open up, there will be undoubtedly an exponential growth in the use of electric vehicles and hybrids. Germany has already got nearly 28,000 electric car charging stations, but the estimate is that they'll need at least 70,000 nationwide to start to kick off major uptake of electric vehicles, and that would include 7,000 fast chargers. Same sort of thing is happening on the other side of the Rhine. The BBC reported that Emmanuel Macron, the French president, similarly announced a rescue package of 9 billion euro or so. And again, there will be big grants to people buying electric vehicles and bonuses to people purchasing a less polluting car, it says. And they're also planning on installing a lot more charging points for these vehicles. They want 100,000 in France by the end of next year, and they want to have France itself manufacturing 1 million electric vehicles annually by 2025. That's a fair old goal. Right, okay, what else have we got? I also linked to a rather unusual video, quick snip from a track day. Not very exciting bit of riding, wet track, not going very fast, mostly upright, but if you look in the background, you'll see a tornado forming. Having never experienced a genuine American tornado, I've been quite close to a little UK one, which ripped some shed roofs off a mile or so away. That got a bit windy, but nothing like an American tornado. I should imagine that everybody made their way back to the pits fairly quickly. So if you're not expecting a tornado on a track day, you're probably not expecting to have to take evasive action to dodge a corn snake either. But apparently that's what happened in Bryn Mawr in South Wales the other day. The RSPCA were called out. They recovered the snake, which was in the road, and it was reported a biker had had a near miss with it just moments earlier, but fortunately no injuries on either side. Okay, so you're watching Kevin Williams, Elevenses. Don't forget, we are running to a new schedule. We're running Wednesdays and Sundays, still at the time of 11 o'clock, and you will be able to catch up with the show over on YouTube. You will be able to find it here as soon as I finish broadcasting live, and it will also be on my Ko-fi page. So plenty of places to watch what I'm doing. All right, okay, so Harley Davidson, they're working on a self-balancing system for the motorcycles. Now, Harleys are traditionally fairly low, but they're also traditionally fairly heavy, and they're also traditionally fairly long wheelbase. And one of the things that does make riding a little bit tricky in is this slow speed control. Certainly more awkward than some bikes I've ridden. However, whilst an experienced rider can manage it without any problem, it's important to remember that a significant proportion of Harley's market is for new riders. Many people in the US would take a riding course and then jump straight on to one of the Milwaukee's brand's products. There are also a significant number of female riders as well, who may be a little bit shorter in stature. So perhaps, given that in mind, you can see where Harley would be coming from with this particular rider aid. The self-balancing system is a high-speed gyroscope, basically. It's a big flywheel that sits in a pair of gimbals, and it's mounted at the back of the machine in the top box. And the idea is that the gyro is spun up 20,000 RPM rather by an electric motor, and that generates enough gyroscopic force to help keep the bike upright. Now, whether that will be fully self-balancing so that the bike would be able to come to a standstill and stay upright, or whether it is just a rider aid in that it would reduce the speed and the weight that would fall onto the side of the bike if the rider started to lose their footing, for example, by putting their foot down in gravel. Who has not done that riding a motorcycle? Not many of us, I shouldn't think. Then the idea is, I think, that the gyro would help keep the bike upright long enough for the rider to regain their footing. The interesting thing, of course, with things like gyroscopes is that an awful lot of people are very worried about having a high-speed chunk of metal whizzing around sort of behind their back. I know a lot of people would be very unhappy about that, but you ride a petrol engine, you've got some fairly heavy bits of metal whizzing around very high speeds between your legs. So I don't think it makes an awful lot of difference that way. However, the extra weight is rather more of an issue. And the other thing that's not entirely clear is what happens as you start to move away, because it will take a while for the gyro to slow down unless it's actually physically braked to a halt. And of course, all the time it's spinning, it's also resisting you steering and leaning the motorcycle. If it's keeping it upright at low speed, it'll be trying to do the same thing as soon as you're rolling. So quite how they'll get around that, I don't know. One possibility, of course, is if it all becomes electric, which is a distinct likelihood in the not too distant future, then the gyroscope could be used to store forward momentum. So, in other words, as soon as you pull away, you feed the momentum that the gyroscope has stored back into the bike to drive it off the line. And that's actually a surprisingly efficient way of saving fuel. Some London buses worked with this trick some years ago. They used a big fiberglass gyroscope stuck under one of the seats at the back, and they made some significant fuel savings with that. Unfortunately, it never went to production on the buses. It was just a trial. So, okay. Still to come, I'm going to be talking about how we use our brain riding the bike. And I've got another item on the electric motorcycles, which I'll cover in just a moment. But some news from North Yorkshire. Now, this might concern you if you enjoy the sound of a fruity motorcycle exhaust, because the local police have promised action on illegal noise levels from motorcycles. Basically, residents have been complaining that since the lockdown has eased, but a lot of people are still not at work, that record numbers of motorcycles have been travelling through the Yorkshire Dales and the North York Moors into the national park areas. And the problem is that a lot of those bikes have illegal exhausts. Now, whether you agree with the noise limits or whether you don't, there is a rule about how much noise a motorcycle can make. And there are complaints if you've got a particularly noisy exhaust. I know some exhausts are ear splitting. When we run the track days down at Brands Hatch, we have a noise limit down there, which is a little bit louder than standard. If you've got a standard exhaust, you'll pass under it easily. If you've got a loud exhaust, a performance exhaust, normally it will go through. But for people who've taken the baffles out of those loud exhausts, generally will fall foul of the noise limit and have to make some on-the-fly modifications or refit the baffle. Local residents are, not surprisingly, not very happy about the constant numbers of motorcyclists who are hurtling through. Often not at high speed, but just at high revs and making a lot of noise. And apparently they've got hold of some decibel meters and they've been out there measuring the noise limits. And they say the evidence is that some are way over the maximum legal level. So the police have said that that they are going to be looking into this. So be careful if you've got a loud exhaust and you're heading into those areas. Be aware that you may come under added scrutiny. All right, okay. Just a little reminder. The show goes up onto my coffee page at Survival Skills, so you can enjoy it there if you missed it live or you want to catch up with some of the back numbers. The other thing that you can find over on Coffee is a back catalogue of Facebook articles. I've already put well over 100 up, and I will be putting more up as the days go by. 2014 and some of 2015 is already up, and of course that leaves 2016 to 2019 still to go. So you can get over there, and for £3 you can access any of those articles for 30 days. And if you subscribe at £3 a month, you can also access my performance bends training course, which is steadily going up online. Not complete yet, but there's a fair amount of work to go into putting that online. So, right, okay. One of the complaints about electric motorcycles is that they're characterless. Regularly I hear people who say, don't want one, don't make the right noises, don't go the right way, doesn't pull like a proper petrol engine. Well, in that case, then the bike built by an Italian company in Torino, 2 Electron, might be for you. They have tried to put the character back into an electric bike by building a prototype. It's called the Emula. You'll see why in a moment, because the motorcycle is designed to emulate the sound, feel, and power delivery of motorcycles of the past. Let me just show you what I mean. There we go. There's the graph. It's in Italian, but I think you can figure out what it is. The top bar there is for a 250 two-stroke. And what you'll see is that there is a sort of fairly peaky power delivery, not too much power, but it gets there quite quickly. And you've got the fairly close spaced gears. The second is an 800cc twin. That would be something possibly like a Triumph Bonneville, or I don't know, there's a KTM, isn't there? There's an 800, something like that. BMW also do one. So again, you've got a fairly short rev range because it's a twin. Gears are a little bit more widely spaced to take advantage of the extra power, and then you've got at the bottom a 600cc 4-cylinder 4-stroke. So you've got a long rev range, climbing to quite a powerful peak, and again the gear ratios will reflect that. It will take you to a fairly high top speed. So it's one of the weirder ideas that I've come across over the years. They aim to bring not just the power delivery, but also, it says, the vibration, noise, and gear shifting too. They'll have some kind of gear shift, which won't actually do anything very much, but give you feedback by doing something to the way the power is delivered through the engine. So it's an interesting idea. The speaker system will be under the seat, and it will play pre-recorded engine sounds to match your chosen motorcycle at the simulated gear and speed. So lots of fun to be had there. And it's got a vibration shaker as well to give you some real tactile feedback. What they plan is to measure what other motorcycles do, and then obviously they can feed that into the software, and ideally you'll be able to get any bike that you wanted from your electric motorcycle. They're calling it the McFly Core, which isn't after McFly the band, but a Marty McFly from Back to the Future. So yeah, that's a weird one. I've seen some strange ideas, but that one is an interesting one altogether. The bike is, if you just leave it in its normal electric mode, it will just act like a normal electric motorcycle, but apparently it's designed to have 155 mile per hour top speed. So if you do wind it on, it looks like it'll go quite quickly. Okay. Right. So, all right. The final part of the day today, I just want to talk a little bit about better riding skills, as I usually try and do at some point. I like to start a lot of my little reports with a story, and this one goes back some years ago. I was working as a basic instructor. I'd just taken a trainee into the test. I'd gone out for a quick run with my other trainee in the moments while the other rider was on test, and got back to the training centre, and just as I pulled up with the second trainee, the examiner pulled up too. Now the bad news is that he was minus the trainee. That can happen for several reasons. Normally, with a modern bike, it means that the examiner and the trainee have somehow become separated. They basically lost each other. It does happen if a trainee takes the wrong road at a junction and the examiner doesn't spot it because they're behind another vehicle. They can go off in different directions, and although the examiner will try and find the trainee, excuse me, after a bit, they will abandon the test and head back to the test centre. Occasionally, the bike breaks down. It has happened. We've had punctures on bikes. That is the usual reason. But I've also had a bike stop in torrential rain with a misfire. Just water's got into the electrics, into the plug caps. Again, very rare, but it does happen. Rather more frequently, it's a minor drop. The rider actually drops it on the U-turn back on the road when the U-turn was carried out as part of the main test. And at that point, either the clutch or the brake usually snaps off, and that means the bike can't be used. So, the examiner filled me in on the details, and indeed it was a dropped bike, and she had broken one of the levers. But the circumstances were a little bit unusual. Now, he'd just carried out the emergency stop exercise. So she'd gone round the block, disappeared out of sight, come back round, and the examiner had been standing there, and he'd raised his hand, and she'd done a perfectly good emergency stop in front of him. Now, this was on a wet road as well. And then something rather odd happened. They both got back on their bike. The examiner gave her the instruction to pull away. And just as she got going, a car pulled out from a side turning and crossed right in front of her and accelerated off at high speed. She had to brake to take evasive action to avoid the car. And she'd locked the front wheel and she'd fallen off. This was in the days before ABS. Now, luckily, she was only a bit bruised, otherwise uninjured, and the bike had just gone down on its crash bars. And apart from the brake lever, was pretty much undamaged. But he was very surprised about this because she'd done that perfectly good emergency stop a moment earlier. Why did she fall off? Well, think about what had been going on. I had taught her to do emergency stops, and by the time she got to the test, she'd probably done 40 or 50 of them, everything from CBT, getting used to using the brakes, right up to full-on emergency stops in the training ground, and also out on the road. We used to make sure that we checked out how they did them on the road. So we know that the trainee could do good emergency stops. But why did she fall off? Well, that's where we have to ask another question. It's why couldn't she use the skills she'd been trained to use when she actually needed it? And the answer is that we have to know a little bit about how the mind works. The problem is that the bike training all happens in a nice, safe environment. She would have developed the technical skill to use the brakes, and she would have developed the recognition skill that she needed to pull up when the examiner stuck his hand up in front of her. I'd been doing that to cue her to go into the learned skills all the way through her training. But the trouble is that nothing in her training had ever trained her to react to a real emergency. She'd been cued to react to somebody standing there raising their hand. So, like every other new license holder, they learn to react to the wrong cue. Nothing had prepared her for the moment when a car pulled out in front of her. So basically what she did was went back to instinct, and she grabbed a handful of front brake and she went down in a big heap. And this isn't really much of a surprise when you think about it. It's not much of a surprise people who do accident reconstructions either. The skilled use of the brake in test conditions is not a guarantee that we will use those skills in an emergency. So this is why I focus so much on thinking about what can go wrong. If we only ever use our skills to think, how am I doing this well, then our skills will let us down in emergencies. If we pat ourselves on the back and tell ourselves how well we just negotiated that corner, we'll have no preparation to deal with a corner that suddenly tightens up on us or goes in a different direction than what we expect. If we pat ourselves on the back and tell ourselves what a wonderfully judged overtake we just made, then we're not going to be prepared and we won't recognize the warning signs for an overtake that's about to go wrong. We really have to think about the emergencies out on the road and how things go wrong, rather than simply focus on better riding skills. So how would I teach somebody how to avoid a car? Well, we're short of pushing a rubber car out in front of them and surprising them. There's not a lot I can do really, apart from suggest that people use their inner simulator, and that's up here, and that's a story for next week. So come pop back on Wednesday next week, and I'll give you the second half of this little talk on how we can train our inner rider to deal with real emergencies out on the road and not just focus on better skills. Better skills are good, but they are not everything we need. Right, okay, so don't forget, we're here again. I'll just remind you with the pop-up that we are back on, that's the wrong one. It's that one I wanted, wasn't it? We're back on Wednesdays and Sundays. I've cut down to 2 shows a week as more and more people are back to work. And I've also got to get back to work at some point as well. My training courses are coming back online, and I'm also offering online training. So do come over and see what I've got to offer at my website, survivalskills.co.uk. That's it for today. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully see you on Sunday. Bye for now.